The sixth part of this Power Query challenge uses data from the Eurostat website. The Eurostat website contains all sorts of data sets about the European Union that they make freely available online. Scrolling through this dataset, I found this air transport dataset looking at air passenger transport by reporting country. I took an extract of that, which you can find on the other tab in this file. Now, as you can see, it's not in an ideal format. We have colons where there are no values, and in addition, we have all of these grouped headers on each row. So that's going to be a bit more tricky to solve. So with this data, you are working on a project looking at airport taxes in Belgium only. You'll need to take the raw data, remove what you don't need, and aggregate the rest to form a simple summary. I've provided the conditions that you'll need to filter by below, and you'll see the desired output at the bottom where we have one value per quarter of 2022. Now we're interested in flights only, not the count of passengers. And so you'll see in the unit column, which is the first column, that it makes a distinction between flights and passengers. The neat thing about this task is we can even go to the Eurostat website and compare our results using their data explorer. I can look at the air passenger transport by reporting country, apply all of the same filters, and get that same tabular result so that I know that what I'm doing in Excel is giving me the correct result. So again, this would be a pretty time-consuming task to try and do manually in Excel. Have a go with Power Query, and in particular, watch out for this grouped column, which is going to be your biggest challenge. Let's take a look at the solution to challenge 6 with the air passenger data. Now, some of this task required filtering out of values in certain columns. The other challenge you would have faced was how to deal with this one grouped column of values and headers. But especially when we're looking at filtering data, it can really help to have some kind of documentation. I obviously provided you with some guidelines in the Excel file, but in addition, if you explored that Eurostat website, you might have found other ways to find some documentation there. So this button with the arrow on the left-hand side of the dataset allows us to download the actual data. The little table icon actually takes us to the Data Explorer view for that particular dataset. As you can see, this is where I applied my filters and was able to see a summary just for Belgium. So you'd have to apply those in there. On the right-hand side, this document with an M is labeled the metadata and may also give you some additional information. And so if you're exploring any of the other data sets in here, be sure to check those out if you're looking for definitions or how to interpret certain columns. Back to our data set, the first thing I want to deal with is these grouped values and headers. Now, normally what you do to try and separate values like this is you would go to transform and you would split the column by delimiter. The problem is that we also want to split the column header because those all appear in one value as well. So the solution to this is to actually demote the headers from headers into the first row and treat them like any other value. Then when we split the column by delimiter, each of those values gets separated along with the values in each row, and then we can re-promote the values to headers to give us one header and one value per cell. Then I applied the filters we were looking for, so that's applying flight to the unit column, applying CAF pass to the second column, filtering our data to Belgium only, and keeping international traffic only. We're then left with the final task, which is how to deal with the quarters, and we experienced something similar earlier on. So we've kind of got two options here. The one static option is to keep the quarters that are of interest to us. And so we could have scrolled across, picked the relevant quarters that we wanted, removed the other columns, which then leaves us with 2022 quarters only. At that point, we can unpivot those values to give us this summary, remove the other columns, and then sort by the quarter name in this case, because it makes sense to present them chronologically, not in order of number of flights. But again, we're presented with the same problem as we had in an earlier task, which is What if there are more quarters and more months in subsequent files that are not filtered out by this query? So we could do this a bit more dynamically, and the only thing that really changes here is that when we go back to the stage where we've got all of the time periods, at this point we unpivot our data and we use a column filter to decide what periods we want. That is probably a more future-proof solution. The rest of the solution really is the same, and we get to this simple summary. I do encourage you to explore that Eurostat website some more. There's tons of great data available there, and I hope you're looking forward to the final challenge of this 7-part Power Query challenge.